Thank you so much for joining us on another exciting episode of The Trading Bell. Today we are coming to you live from Murang'a County, where we shall be speaking to the Managing Director at Kakuzi, and that is Christopher Flowers. He'll be talking to us at length about what Kakuzi has been up to, as well as the foreseeable future of what are they investing in. But first things first, let's take a look at Chris Flowers' profile.
Chris Flowers is a qualified agricultural engineer with a Masters of Science from Cranfield University in the UK. He has over 25 years of experience in the tea and forestry sector, covering Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda and Malawi. More recently, Chris has been involved with the development of Kakuzi's macadamia and avocado business, which has now grown to be one of East Africa's leading producers. Chris joined Kakuzi PLC in 2013 as the managing director. He also holds board positions with Eastern Produce Kenya in Nandi Hills, a quality tea producer, Eastern Produce Malawi, which produces tea and macadamia nuts in Malawi, as well as Eastern Produce Tanzania, a newly formed company looking to establish avocados and macadamia orchards in Tanzania.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you. Welcome to Kakuzi.
Such a pleasure to be here, and of course first time at Kakuzi. Such a pleasant environment here.
Yeah.
Away from the hustle and bustle of Nairobi.
Well, welcome, and glad you made the journey.
Right. So let's just begin with Kakuzi is a company that has been in Kenya for quite a number of years, and of course it's also one of the listed companies at the stock exchange. Just walk us through what Kakuzi is all about, and of course looking at the agricultural space, what has been the journey like?
Okay, I mean, Kakuzi has a long history. Originally in the early 1900s, Kakuzi Fiberlands was established as a sisal producer, and then there was a transformation into coffee, and the modern day Kakuzi really dates back to the 1960s, and about 25-30 years ago a decision was really made to diversify Kakuzi out of coffee and tea into other crops, and that process created an exploration into avocados, more recently macadamias, cattle production, forestry, pineapples, arable farming, and where we are with a very new experiment in blueberry production as well.
All right. And why the name Kakuzi? Is it a meaning for something? I've tried checking my Swahili. I can't get
No,
it.
it's not. It's a historical name related to this area. I'm also trying to search for some background on where the name comes from.
All right, all right. So Chris, let's drive the conversation forward. Looking at the portfolios that you handle at Kakuzi, just unpack this for us by just walking us through how have the various portfolios been performing on an agricultural perspective.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, diversification is key to success as far as we as Kakuzi are concerned, and we focus on a number of core crops. So avocados is the crop that really everybody's talking about, and Kakuzi undertook its first exports in around about 1999. Obviously, with any commodity, you have your good years and your bad years. So our objective has been to make sure we've got sufficient agricultural diversity that if one crop has a bad year, it's bolstered by the successes of another crop. So avocados, we then also moved into macadamias, and then our forestry products are obviously here for poles and for timber, and our beef products as well, which has been mainly beef into Nairobi, but over the last 3 years we've established our own butchery here on the main highway, and so we're able to sell directly to the consumer. All of this requires an intimate knowledge of your markets. It's okay to produce an avocado or a macadamia, but if you don't have a long-term view about developing market relationships, it's actually much more complex to sell those products in the manner and get the price that you want. And I think that's a key message for us as avocado producers and macadamia producers. It's a long-term goal. It's a long-term business. Market relationships are key, and not just producing a fruit or a nut that's of the right quality to get into an export market, but actually ticking all the boxes that your customers in those markets want from you takes a lot of work.
Speaking about the export market, it has been very volatile for a couple of years now, especially for East Africa.
Yeah.
How has the impact been, especially for agro producers like yourselves, and what do you see in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, the volatility is not going to go away. Avocados in 2019 was a much better year than in 2018. It was a completely reverse position. 2018 was very difficult. 2019 was probably one of the best avocado markets East Africa has seen in its history. I think we've got to take a cautious approach to what 2020 looks like for avocado pricing. There's a lot of speculation that production from traditional producers is going to be much higher than it was last year, and that will have a downward price pressure. The exciting position for Kakuzi is that our recent experiment and investment into blueberry production, we're going to really see how that fares in 2020. We're expecting those fruits to be ready around about the third quarter, and putting that into the export markets and seeing how it fares in terms of arrival, quality arrival, and obviously our financial returns from that is going to be something we see here very much towards the end of the year.
All right. And one of the big areas for Kenya, of course, is agriculture. And this is captured in the President's Big Four agenda and around food security.
Yeah.
We've seen the President really being keen on growing the value addition narrative. He's also been able to do a lot of visits to countries where he's struck some bilateral partnerships where Kenya can be able to export some of our key products. And one of the products that is on the front line for some good markets is avocado. From a food security perspective, how is Kakuzi aligning itself, especially in terms of taking up the opportunities that the government is presenting?
We've got a number of strategies. In terms of food security, we have obviously our beef production, which we've been doing for many years. Our arable operations are now producing good quality animal feed, specifically for our surrounding community, tend to be buying our hay and on our oat products. And then what we're hoping is that our blueberry production will also come into local consumption trends as well. We were very pleasantly surprised when we initially put our blueberries into Nairobi supermarkets, and the consumption was taken up. And I think that's indicated to us that there is a much more of a demand for healthy superfood products here as well as overseas. Our smallholder investments are also very much paying off. We've got about 2,000 avocado smallholders. We had a very successful open day towards the back end of last year, where we had close to about 400 or 500 smallholders who took part. They had an opportunity to understand more about how to grow fruits. We also had an award ceremony where we gifted or granted certificates to the best performing smallholders and announced our second payment bonuses as well.
All right. And still tied to this, of course, you do know that the President had a State of the Nation address where he did institute a number of reforms for the agricultural sector, and he cut across the dairy industry, tea sector, and of course coffee.
Yes, yeah.
Perhaps, do you feel this set of directives is going to impact the sector in the right way?
I mean, Kakuzi only produces green leaf now. It sells its green leaf to processing facilities and it receives a payment like any other smallholder. I think we've got to digest the contents of the President's speech. It was very interesting, and there's going to be a lot of changes, I'm sure, that come out of that. I mean, fundamentally, here in Kenya, in terms of tea, our big problem is that we are producing a huge amount of tea, and that is predominantly exported. We only consume domestically between 5 and 10% of what we actually produce, and domestic consumption, or improving domestic consumption, is quite an important part of the future strategy for tea in my understanding of it.
All right. And Chris, one of the aspects Kakuzi is credited for is sustainability. And we've been having a lot of rainfall in East Africa, and we've seen stories of floods. But Kakuzi has a very interesting model around putting up dams.
Yeah.
Just talk to us more about this.
Kakuzi's journey into sustainability covers a huge different variety of topics, from climate, carbon footprint management, as you've just mentioned, dams and irrigation, soil fertility. But specifically on dams and irrigation, I'm just reading through some of the archived minutes just before we had our sort of discussions. And there was a minute in the mid-80s where somebody made a decision, probably very, very fortuitously, to say, are we a real estate company or are we an agricultural company? And the result of that was that there was a sale of a building that Kakuzi owned in Nairobi, and the dams that Kakuzi has were constructed with the proceeds of that sale.
How much was the sale?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember. Quite a lot.
Must be quite a lot.
Yeah. And so Kakuzi has constructed for many years dams that capture the rainfall that fall on Kakuzi's land, and we're very lucky that the majority of the water we capture actually originates on the land that Kakuzi farms. And that means in the dry season, after considerable investment, you can actually irrigate your crops and somewhat mitigate yourself from impacts of low rainfall or rainfall at the wrong time, and certainly climate change. And that journey is one of continuous improvement, and I think any agricultural business now has got to be far more tech savvy, far more understanding about what flexibility is and what you need to do to protect yourself against climate change. And to do that in agriculture, you need to take a very long-term view. So long-term stability is key to people being able to take a long-term view, and if you can take a long-term view, you can take a view about capturing sustainability in your strategic plans.
And of course, Chris, you cannot capture all this, the long-term view, without capital.
Correct.
You're a listed company. Are you looking at seeking any fresh capital?
We're quite well placed at the moment. We have strategic plans which probably cover the next 10 years, and looking at reasonable commodity prices and a fair wind, I think our strategic development plans will be covered by self-generated funds.
All right. And finally, we have very few companies that are in the agriculture space that are listed at the NSE. Perhaps would you like to share with us some of the benefits you've enjoyed by being a listed company? Because there are some other companies out there who are considering perhaps of listing, but they don't see the real reason why.
I mean, we're incredibly privileged. We've got 1,300 investors who, many of them have taken their money and put it with Kakuzi for many, many years, and continue to support us. Our shares aren't frequently traded, and I think that means is that people are happy in the direction that Kakuzi is going. In terms of the listing, what it allows us to do is to share the journey with investors who want to be part of it. Obviously, with a listing comes responsibilities, and corporate governance is a key part of that. And we take a very strong and passionate view about how that plays out in our operations. And I think smaller companies, when they look at listing, they perhaps look at what listing entails in terms of compliance, and they see that as perhaps a barrier. And as we go forward, it should be an opportunity to all of us to try and encourage more listings, and maybe we've got to look at methods of allowing smaller companies to be scrutinised correctly, but perhaps in a slightly different way.
All right. I just want to get your closing thoughts, especially in terms of where do you see Kakuzi in the next 5-10 years from now, in light of the new bug that has seemingly beat a good number of Kenyans who are considering going into agriculture. And of course, avocado is also a crop that has attracted a number of the youthful farmers in the country, as well as even in the region. What do you see, especially for that crop, now that there's a overwhelmingly interesting interest around it?
I think it's got a huge potential. I think you have to make sure that there's a number of fundamentals that you're following. Not putting all your eggs in one basket is a key message. The knowledge piece, it's okay saying that I can grow a crop, but where am I going to sell it to? And understanding your market and what that means to sell products into those markets. We talk about traceability, we talk about quality, we talk about sustainability. What makes a consumer want to buy a Kenyan fruit? That's key to being able to not guarantee, you'll never guarantee returns, but mitigate against losses as much as you possibly can. There will be bad years, and we must make sure that everybody goes into growing these crops with their eyes fully open.
All right. Perfect place to end the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris, for your time.
Thanks.
Well, we've been speaking there to Christopher Flowers, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Kakuzi, and he's quite optimistic of the agricultural boom in the region, and especially in Kenya. But for agriculture to thrive, he's keen on around precision. It cannot be business as usual. Agriculture needs to be precise, and you have to also look at the long-term plans so that it is sustainable. On that note, we want to take a look at how the markets have been performing on this day. We now transition into market analysis.
That means it's time to take a look at the numbers. Of course, earlier on, Agina was speaking to Chris Flowers of Kakuzi, but right now we want to take a look at the bourse. And joining me is Samuel Gishohi. He is the head of the business division for brokerage at NCBA Investment Bank. Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's jump right into it with the NSE 20 share index. We're seeing it's gone down by 0.91%. So is this significant? Does it actually mean that the market is correcting?
Indeed, it is. We do expect a correction between the second week of January to beginning of February. And then after that, we do expect as banks start to announce their results, then we could see the market get more excited. If you look a little more closely, you'll notice that it's all the indices which have actually declined. You'll see that most of the blue chips, which hit their 52-week highs, about in December rather, we will see that they've gone down by quite a bit, 10% margins. For example, KCB and Equity were both trading at 55.50 at their peak. Now they're at about 31.50 or thereabouts. So that is an indication that the correction is happening, yes.
Okay, and does this also some sort of have an impact when we look at the top gainers and losers? We're seeing companies like Uchumi, we're seeing Kapchorua Tea, Kenya Airways on the gainers list. Losers, we're seeing BK Group, Kakuzi, Home Africa Limited and the likes.
Well, usually when you see none of the blue chips on the gainers or losers list, it is a sign that there's a bit of either stagnation or low liquidity.
Yes.
And because the ones that are on the gainers and losers there are no blue chips. Of course, we have EABL there and Nation Media, but they don't have a significant effect on the indices. And so it just indicates that then we could be seeing a very slow decline in as much as the correction is happening. It's not happening at a high rate, so the blue chips are not actually appearing on the boards for the gainers and losers. But you will see them in the movers, because then Safaricom usually you will find there, you find KCB, Equity, which will tend to be the ones that move the most within the market in terms of volumes.
All right, so even as we keep a look at the numbers there, let's now take a look at Markets 101. Well, now let's take a look at the question on the street. And this week around, of course, we did see President Uhuru Kenyatta in the United Kingdom, and that was for the UK Africa Investment Forum. And he also presided over the cross-listing of the green bond on the LSE. So our question today actually does come in from somebody about that. And they're asking, what does that mean when we have this cross-listing of this bond on both the LSE as well as the NSE? So maybe you can explain to us what it signifies.
Well, cross-listing means that a security a security is listed on more than one market. And that listing is usually the tendency for cross-listings. Of course, I've seen the opposite happen in East Africa, is that the security is listed on a larger market. This is to sort of try and get higher volumes or more liquidity on that instrument, because they think that the bigger market will possibly be able to take up part of that bond. Now, for example, this is a green bond, and green bonds, in the name, it indicates that this is a bond that is directed at environmentally friendly investment. And I think for us, that would resonate more with investors on the LSE than probably here. And so it would make a lot of sense to cross-list it there.
All right, thank you for that. So now that that question is answered, let's take a look at the NSE historical facts. And that's how we wrap up this episode of The Trading Bell. Gishohi, thank you so much for joining us. All your insights are always appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
And with that, of course, I'm going to let you know that you can follow The Trading Bell on the social media handles that are appearing on your screen. Next time around, we'll have another conversation, another guest, more market analysis, and so much more. So do keep up with The Trading Bell. My name is Malika Kazia. Thank you for watching.